Members, good morning. We've got a quorum here, and it's also the appointed time. I call the meeting to order. This is the general meeting of the Welfare Services Panel in 2018. First thing on the agenda, information papers issued since the last meeting. We have none. Second, items are for discussion in the next meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for the 12th of February 2018 at 10:45, with three proposals for discussion. First, pilot scheme on on-site preschool rehabilitation services. Second, implementation of enhanced old age living allowance. 3, review of comprehensive social security assistance scheme. Members, do you have any comments on these three items? If members are agreeable, then that will be the agenda for our next meeting. The meeting today is rather long. I ask for your understanding. So we have 2 items plus 1 public hearing. We will first deal with progress of implementation of the special scheme on privately owned sites for welfare users. And please refer to the 2 papers, one by the administration and another by the Secretariat, respectively. We are going to meet until 1 p.m. and then 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. is our lunch break, and then after the lunch we will continue until 4 p.m. This is a rather lengthy meeting, and I hope we can all be very mindful of the time constraint, and I'll be very strict when it comes to time control. Let us welcome Mr. Casper Choi, Undersecretary for Labour and Welfare, Mr. Kenneth Zhang, PAS, Mr. Lam Ka-tai, Deputy Director of Social Welfare, and Mr. Kok Chi Leung, Assistant Director. Undersecretary, can you briefly walk us through the paper? Thank you, Chairman. We have adopted a multi-pronged approach to provide the social services required by the community in identifying a suitable land and premises for these facilities. And then in September 2013, the government launched NGOs special scheme on privately owned sites for welfare users. So through development or new development, NGOs can use their own sites to provide welfare services demanded by society, in particular in providing additional places for elderly care. We received 63 applications from NGOs, and according to these applicants, if all these items are successfully implemented, we can have another 9,000 or so additional elderly service places and about 8,000 additional rehabilitation service places. Since the implementation of the scheme, we've been committed to helping applicant NGOs to start their projects. We have regular meetings with them. There have been 7 so far. The last was held in November last year. We maintain close communication with them to clarify and also enhance their schemes. According to our latest progress, there are already 3 projects completed, and with services being commenced in phases. 3 other projects have entered the construction phase, and it's expected that it can be completed in or before 2018-19. These 6 projects provide various welfare services, including about 260 additional elderly services places, of which about 100 are subvented places, and about 1,020 additional rehabilitation service places. Please refer to Annex 4 for details. For the other applications, they are at different stages of planning. 9 have got LF funding for technical feasibility studies. Another of them are doing the TFS using funds from other sources. Please refer to Annex 5 for details. SWD has written to applicant NGOs to submit revised proposals in 2017-18, and we will review their progress so that we can have a more accurate estimate of places available in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Undersecretary. Since the project was launched in 2013 policy address, there have been many rounds of briefings to this panel by the administration, and I thank the administration for this very detailed paper. I open the floor to members for questions. We have Mr. Poon Xiu Chang and Dr. Fernando Zhang. I'll give the floor to Mr. Poon Xiu Ping first, 4 minutes each. Thank you, Chairman. The demand for services have outstripped supply, and I think we can see the progress under the scheme. And the paper has been very specific. I have a few follow-up questions. There are 43 NGOs involving 63 projects, and according to the Undersecretary, 3 projects are already commissioned, and another 3 are expected to be completed in or before 2018-19, and there are 9 having their TVS, and another 1 is doing its own TFS with its own funding. So there are 16 projects altogether. And Annex 3 shows us the distribution of these projects in the territory. There are 40 projects still under planning. I'd like to ask the administration when it expects these projects can start, because demand is very keen. And if you look at Annex 3, in Kowloon, there are 5 and 9 in NT and none on Hong Kong Island. They can provide 17,000 odd service places. As mentioned in your last paragraph, you understand that these projects involve complicated issues. Now, you don't have any such project in Hong Kong. Are you going to identify sites on Hong Kong Island to provide these services? I'd like to know whether the administration has got any plan in mind. Undersecretary, thank you, Mr. Poon, for your question. These projects are at different stages. Some projects are more straightforward, and therefore they can start their TFS and also construction earlier. And for others, they need public consultation with the local community, and some may involve lease modifications with statutory requirements to fulfill, and some of the projects will see revisions in their original plans, and therefore the back and forth procedures take time. In fact, in Central and Western District, we do not have any such a scheme, special scheme, but there are other districts in Hong Kong with special schemes. As mentioned in our paper, SWD has got its own planning for service provision. In fact, in the western part of Kennedy Town, we have a public works development project. We will consider adding welfare services there. So residents on Hong Kong need not worry that there won't be additional facilities in the future for them. And we've asked these service organizations to provide additional papers as far as possible. As I said, there's been 7 meetings with them. The target is to see whether they have queries or they have encountered difficulties, and we see what we can do to expedite their progress. So we just had our 7th meeting, and if more information can be provided, we will have a better idea of their progress. Any follow-up from you, Mr. Poon? Yes. there are 9 projects with funding from the lottery fund for their TFS. Do you have any idea as to when the TFSs can be completed? After our last meeting, we expected them to provide supplementary information within the first half of this year. Dr. Fernando Zhang, we've always supported the special scheme because the expanded services are much sought after in the community, in the elderly care sector and in the rehabilitation sector. And we also need preschool rehabilitation services, and the waiting time is disastrous. So we very much hope that these projects can be implemented ASAP. This council has got a few concerns over this scheme. First, the location and also number of places. In 1918-19, there will be 260 additional elderly service places available. But if I read the paper correctly, there are about 100 places that are subvented. And that means 160 of them are non-subvented places. Well, we are talking about public resources. And if we use public resources to build welfare service facilities, then if the proportion of subvented places is so low, then this is not really reasonable.
We
offer public funds to NGOs, and they are self-financing. In other words, they are like private by nature. So, under these circumstances, those with money can get services early, but then those without money will have to wait. A lot of the services are on the basis of central waiting, and this is unfair because we use public resources to help the operators to offer services. But then, at the end of the day, those with money can get timely services. Now, we are not biased against the wealthy, but when it comes to the use of public funds to provide services, we believe that we should be helping the poor, those low-income earners. So I am very worried about this. All along, we are very concerned that the contracted institutions are on 6:4 ratio. That is 60% are subvented, 40% self-financing. For this project, I think it should be the other way around. For the contracted institutions or homes, well, all places should be subvented. Well, at most, we can accept a ratio of 8:2. For these projects, why is the percentage of self-financing places so high? Can you explain? For these projects, there is demolition of some facilities to be redeveloped, and the type of the services may be changed. After existing facilities are demolished, there may be the need of relocation or closing down of some services. Now, one of the services I am more concerned of is the so-called blind factory. In other words, the blind or the visually impaired can work there as employees. Now, this is very different from sheltered workshop. This is a formal kind of employment. But together with this special scheme, it may come to an end. So can the administration explain? I consider this a backward development of service mode, and it should not be encouraged. So in terms of subvention or backward development of service model, do you have some measures in place? We plan to conclude this item at 9:55. Dr. Fernando Zhang, you have used up your time already. I think there is still, I can still allow time for the other secretary to respond. Well, concerning the 6:4 ratio, This is our planning standard. Concerning service of homes in different districts, we consider actual circumstances in the future. If there's the need, if the demand is big, well, in the past, there were examples in Shamshui-Po in which the ratio reached 8:2. So don't worry, if there is the need, when service commences, this ratio can be adjusted. Besides, concerning the special scheme, there are a number of items involving relocation. So people are worried about the continuity of the service. We will keep in close contact with the organizations. So when they move, we will identify vacant premises for them to continue their service. So each project is different. We will work with the organizations to make sure that impact can be minimized. Chairman, my question has not been answered. 260 places, 60% of them are private or self-financing. Less than 40% are subvented. I'm not happy with even 60% subvented places. And now you are talking about 60% self-financing. So I don't think this is appropriate use of public funds. That's point number one. Secondly, you did not answer my question about blind factory. Perhaps the Undersecretary doesn't know the situation. Can someone who knows answer the question? Chairman, the question asked by Dr. Zhang concerning the 260 places, 100 are subvented places. That's about the first 6 projects that will be accomplished. And in 6 of them, is such that there will be provision of elderly service places. 2 of them involve elderly home care services. And in one of them, 60% of the places are subvented, 40 non-subvented. For the other home, all are non-subvented places. Why? Because that organization's home right from the beginning offered non-subvented places. And under the special scheme, that organization has 3 projects. So this is one of the 3 projects. We have discussed with that organization that in another project, they will offer elderly home care service, and they will offer subvented service. That's the main reason. Another question asked is about the blind factory. Because the blind union has to be redeveloped, so there will be changes in operation of the blind factory. In terms of places in the sheltered workshop, apart from reprovisioning, we also increase the number of places in sheltered workshop. Now, for this project, they are in the tendering phase. They are preparing tender documents to conduct feasibility or technical feasibility study. So we will liaise further with the organization. Chairman, I will wait for my next turn. Right. Concerning the use of public resources, if this is skewed towards the private market, it is not desirable. Deputy Chairman, thank you, Chairman. In the paper, one of the key points is that in the past, there was criticism that the progress of this scheme was very slow. At the end of November 2016, only 1 project was completed. In 2018-19, 240 additional places will be provided. So I would like to know, you have received 63 preliminary proposals. So what are the reasons behind such slow progress? I know that the situation is complicated. All the sites are owned by NGOs. And as far as you know, you want to encourage organizations to apply for non-government owned sites. So how many such sites are still available? Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the questions are very clear, please. Thank you, Chairman. As said just now, there are so many different projects under the special scheme, and they have different circumstances. If the zoning doesn't have to be changed, well, actually, 6 projects have been completed, and some took longer time for different reasons. For example, lease conditions, OZP, zoning, consultation in district councils, which was not planned for in the past. So all these would lead to longer duration. In some projects, proposals were amended, so other sites were applied for because of non-welfare service proposals or recommendations. These are the reasons why the progress was slow and the time required was longer. In the past years, we had many meetings with them. At the end of last year, we asked them for supplementary information. We wanted some organizations to start earlier with less modifications for rehabilitation service or elderly home care service. These services are really in need. So we want to speed up the process, but there are a lot of steps that we cannot bypass. For example, consultation. As regards other figures, I will defer to my colleagues. How many more sites owned by NGOs can be developed for welfare purpose? Yes, Chairman. For NGOs owning sites in the form of private contract, well, there are about 100 such sites. And this time, in the special scheme, we have received 63 new applications, because if there is the need for demolition and redevelopment, the property age must be 25 years or above. Right. Now, I asked this question because we have to look into the future. If all 63 sites are okay, then how many more sites are available in Hong Kong? It's really too slow since the 2013 policy address. Is there any way to expedite the progress? Well, in the past, we already rationalized the procedure, and things have been faster. It also depends on the intention of the organizations. So we want to finish this round first, and then we will look at future development direction. Please take note of the very low pace. I do understand that there are a lot of difficulties and it takes a lot of deliberation. Well, but since 2014 till now, the progress has not been satisfactory. Chairman, as the Undersecretary said, since 2013, after the scheme was launched, together with NGOs and Council of Social Service, there were 7 meetings, and we listened very carefully to NGOs' recommendations. So we have put in place some optimization measures. We wanted to expedite the progress. Let me give an example. If they applied to the Lotteries Fund, they would apply for consultancy as well as engineering cost. Now they can apply in 2 stages, because if they also apply for the engineering cost at one go, then at tendering, the engineering cost may exceed the amounts that they applied for, and they had to reapply. So we have been putting in place some improvement measures to expedite the progress. Thank you. Next, Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. Thank you, Chairman. Members wanted the scheme to be faster. According to your report, 43 organizations offer 63 projects. There will be 9,000 additional elderly care places and 8,000 rehabilitation places. These numbers are quite good. They can alleviate the tight supply situation now. Now, there are 100 sites involved and 13 projects. There are 30-odd to 40-odd projects that still have not been developed yet. And you said that you would consider them in the second phase. Chairman, if the scheme can offer so many places, then why don't we make full use of all the resources instead of waiting till the next stage? Population is aging fast. So there are really not enough elderly care and rehabilitation services. So why don't we move faster instead of waiting for the next stage? There is a restriction on property age of 25 years. Will this actually hinder development? I don't have the figures, but if you look at some places, if a bigger number of places can be accommodated, why don't we lower the property age restriction? As you said, you are now looking for sites to build new homes, and it's not easy. So why do you put in place such a restriction? If the organization finds it feasible, then can you lower the property age restriction so that there will be more places? 2 questions, Chairman. Thank you. Under Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. When we launched this scheme, we do not want some buildings to be demolished soon after they are built. This is not good use of resources. And since 2010, we saw a lot of room for optimization. So as said just now, we used our experience to expedite the process. For those 100-odd sites, it will be determined by the organizations. At the start of the first round, some organizations did not take part. I guess some of them were interested. So concerning long-term development direction, we have to first complete the work in hand. After the last meeting in the first half of the year, we wanted to be in a better position in terms of progress, so we will review our future direction. In relation to rehabilitation and elderly care homes, well, there is big demand. This is just one of the directions. We have different ways. For example, we can identify vacant sites in public housing and government buildings. We have identified 3 school campuses to step up our rehabilitation service. So there are different ways. In the future, after doing a review, if there are ways to optimize the current method, we can consider. Then what about the 25-year restriction? Can you consider that? This is the first time I heard this proposal. Now, from 1 year to 25 years is quite a long time. Yes, we'll consider that. How long will it take for you to do a review? You mean now you want to review the current scheme first before you move on to the next stage? We don't have a direction yet, but as said just now, last month we had a meeting with the organizations, and early this year we hope to have all the supplementary information. Then we know the direction, what we can do, and what are the difficulties, how we can solve them. So after the first half of this year, we will examine future development direction. Deputy Director, 25-year standard. Actually, in September 2013, when we introduced the scheme, that's one of the requirements. Among the applications received, there is one project in which property age was below 25 years. But then, upon redevelopment, more places can be offered for our society. So that project was approved for redevelopment under this special scheme. So in other words, well, I hope you can speed up your review, because it's not easy to identify other places. It's better to work on the existing places. So you can speed up your review, and then you can move on to the next stage. According to the Undersecretary, they will complete the first stage first. Then that will take long. Only so few places were offered in the past 3 years. So how long would it take for the first stage to be completed?
Chairman, I've heard that members want us to do more. We'll go back to think about it. Now, we are very keen on this. Now, the SWD, ourselves, and also the community are really anxious about it. Mr. Chen, yesterday you had a, Mr. Chairman, you had a conference with Dr. Fernando Cheung in respect of the floor space per person in RCHGs. And it is even worse than the overcrowded units in the in public housing units, and also high security prisons, cells of high security prisons. And we really don't know whether such a project will be completed within 5 or 7 years. I believe the basic requirements will not be worse than the basic requirements of the law. But if they have, if the RCHEs have taken up more or taken in more elderly people, then it will have breached the law. Now, in your feasibility study, some will provide homes for the elderly. If it is a reprovision, then will you just follow the minimum standard of the law, or you require them to provide space that will not be less than they used to provide in the past? So I just want to ask the administration, in your technical feasibility study, or TFS, after doing a lot, will floor space per person be taken into account? Now, the law's requirement is the minimum. In our special scheme, all new projects will have to comply with the facility requirement list. Say if a certain project has yet, to be in the TFS stage, then they will have to comply with our revised list, because they are self-financing and also subvented services. They have to fulfill the requirements. Now it's 6.5. Now, after the revision, then it will follow the law. That has yet to be decided. In fact, in early November, we issued our letter to all the participants in the special scheme. And in fact, the list of facilities have been approved and it has come into effect. Apart from being applicable to this scheme, is it also a guidepost for other projects? Well, all the subvented organizations will have to comply. So if there are new contract homes, they will have to follow the new facility list. It is for new homes, right? But if they do not comply now, then do they need to cut the number of residents? Well, they will. They only have to comply with the list that was approved there and then. So this list, the new list, will only apply to new projects. So if they have redevelopment, then they need to follow the old standard or a new standard. The new standard. The list of facilities are for subvented items, and they have to follow. Dr. K.K. Kwok. Chairman, concerning the special scheme, I have no strong criticisms against it, but I'm disappointed. There are only 260 RCHE places. There are about 5,000 elderly people who passed away before they even got a place in a RCHE. Chairman, you know that more than I do. Now, having done so much, they will only provide 260 extra places, and that's indeed shameful. Among the projects approved, some are subvented places. Now, say, in the Haven of Hope project, it is not a subvented project. It's a self-financing project. They use their own money, and they have to get their money on their own. And this chief executive is of that organization's member of the EXCO. I don't know whether you favor those who are powerful and wealthy. I just want to know whether there are clear indicators for those who are waiting in the project, in the scheme. You just leave them to their own devices, or you require them to spell out in their proposals. There is a need to deal with the severe shortage of RCHE places, and such places should all be subvented. You're going to spend $10 billion. You've relaxed all planning restrictions at the end, and at the end of the day, only those who are able to pay, and only those projects that can be self-financing will prevail. Now, in fact, the NGOs are very capable. And their CEOs are taking millions of dollars per year in their paychecks, and they also have other perks or fringe benefits. Now you let them have their self-financing projects, and therefore they share profits. This should have been a good thing, $10 billion to help the NGOs, but I find it very disappointing. It's just a failure. 6,000 elderly passed away while they're waiting for RCHE places. That's really absurd, and that's saddening. They owe us an answer. Now the question has been answered before when it comes to this issue. 100 subvented places. That's something really hard to defend. Can there be any change in policy? I'm really not optimistic. The DD. Now, the 43 NGOs participating in this scheme are non-profit organizations. They are providing social services, but their CEOs take home millions of dollars per year. Well, there will be no sharing of profits because they are NGOs, non-profit making NGOs. Now, starting from, we received a proposal starting from September 2013. We have been talking to them over the years. Members asked why among 260 places only 100 are subvented places. When the 63 projects are completed, the number of RCHE places will amount to 7,000. In the first 6 projects which have been completed or are about to be completed, only 2 provide RCHE places, and the 6 provide RCHD places. There will be more subvented RCHE places in the future. Can the scheme be strengthened? I don't think 7,000 can ease our mind, because you only have more, a little bit more to accommodate those who have passed away while waiting. We will work hard towards increasing the number of places. Those who ask for the second round, Dr. Fernando Cheung or other members, if not, then I'll draw a line after Dr. Cheung has asked his question and the administration has replied. Dr. Cheung, 4 minutes. Yes, I want to follow up the issue on the ratio between self-financing and subvented places. The 60-40 ratio is not cannot be defended. Now, there's a chance of making profit from self-financing places, but the DD denied that. But we have seen such facts. I don't want to name names, but some NGO did distribute the surpluses one-off to their employees, not just once to their senior officers. So profit sharing does exist and has happened. And the money involved doesn't come from the self-financing project. It does come from public funds. Let's not argue over NGO governance here. With regard to the Haven of Hope project, it is dubious or suspicious. The CEO is the chairman of the Elderly Commission. Our policy is to give priority to subvented projects, and self-financing projects should be put on the second tier. But yet, in your projects, you give first, give the assistance first to a self-financing project, and therefore it looks suspicious. Now, among the homes, you have a schedule of accommodation. You have suggestions for the facilities and also the size of the homes. Yesterday, together with Dr. Xiu, and also together with our working group, we called a press conference and asked for amending the law to increase the spatial provision to the elderly or the PWDs. We want the schedule of accommodation SOA to be improved, and we want you to give us your formula. It will be helpful to us. Now, there is a serious deficiency in provision of services in these areas. Now, you want to make use of the space, but I don't want you to overbuild. You aim at quantity. From a management point of view, as long as the numbers look well, then you say the problem is solved. But we don't want to build homes with 1,000 inhabitants. Now the elderly people, the persons with disabilities should not be accommodated in a prison or in a castle. They should be in contact with the community. They should have the ambience of a home. But these large institutions don't have such an ambience. Now in Tuen Mun, the Pt1 home accommodates over 1,000 elderly people. It really doesn't look like a home. I hope that you can review the modus operandi of your service. You shouldn't just meet the quantity target, though you are far from doing that. Yes, we will provide supplementary information. I agree with Dr. Cheung that a big home is more cost-effective, but we do encourage smaller homes to provide a more personal service and give the ambience of a home. We have been asking for this for years. The welfare facilities should have been incorporated in planning new communities or new housing estates. You just say that they will give us a piece of land for a new social welfare building, but that is not good enough. That is not good. You should have the traditional arrangement. Say, on the ground floor, traditionally we provide the ground floor to the welfare services. But now you just have a big social welfare building, a freestanding one. Now, if you do so, you will build a big one. But if you put it under a public housing block, then you can merge the units into smaller homes, and they therefore look like a real home. If we provide ample space, enough room, then smaller NGOs can apply for funding. If we want to promote civics, the development of civic society, and enable our elderly people to live in the community, then the institution should not follow the present mode. You should leave some space on the ground floor of public housing blocks for facilities for the elderly. When you use public funds, you shouldn't just aim at self-financing places, nor should the money goes to the pay package of the CEOs of NGOs. And the second point is the issue of small homes, small institutions versus big institutions. We don't want castle-like RCHEs or RCHDs. And in fact, the SWD has difficulties in the provision of social welfare building in a housing estate. In fact, the cost is much higher if they have a freestanding big social service building, vis-a-vis having the ground floors of a public housing block. Let us now move on to the next item, new initiatives on setting up funds to provide enhanced care and support for elderly and persons with disabilities. The Undersecretary will remain. May I thank the government officials who have helped us with the previous item. All right, we have our Secretary for Labour and Welfare, Dr. Law, the DD, Social Welfare, and also AD, Social Welfare, and Acting AD, Social Welfare. Ms. Ho, CSWO.
呢個chamber 嘅。佢要睇一睇我哋就會安排冇錯。
唔係其實立法會係有對唔住啊，正話即係
My apologies. We have not prepared a ramp. If we have been told, we would have prepared a ramp. My apologies. Yes, there are movable ramps in this council.
OK， 請坐。
Yes, please be seated.
好啊，先。
Secretary, can you walk us through the paper, please? Secretary for Labour and Welfare. Thank you, Chairman and members. Good morning. Under this item, we have two new initiatives. There are two new funds for members' approval. In the CS policy address, it was announced that two funds be set up. One being the Innovation and Technology Fund for Application in Elderly and Rehabilitation Care, or the INT Fund for Application, and the other is the Arts Development Fund for Persons with Disabilities. We're here to introduce the two new funds to you. For the INT Fund for Application, the objective is to earmark $1 billion for setting up the fund to subsidize elderly services units for procurement and try out of new IT products. There can be two types. First, to assist them to procure or to rent INT products. And the fund can also cover both hardware and software. And the second category of products is to allow applicants to identify suitable technology research and development companies as working partners to try their newly developed technology products. That is to try out new R&D products. And for eligibility criteria, all organizations providing residential or daycare or community or and other NGOs and private organizations are eligible, but of course they must have a portion receiving SW subsidy. There will be about 1,200 units eligible. The ceiling, there is a ceiling for the grant, but I will not set out the details here. But the grant will cover expenses for staff training and up to 5 years of warranty and maintenance of the products. As members may know, very often when organizations used IT products, one of the constraints was not the one-off capital cost, or rather they were worried about the cost for repair and maintenance. So the design of the fund is such that we want to address the concerns of the organizations as well. And the second fund is the Arts Fund for Persons with Disabilities, BWDs. That is under CAP 1096 SWD. The director of SW will set up the fund. We will plan to spend $560 billion so that the revenue can be the annual money available for granting under the fund. If need be, and with the support of the management committee, the capital can also be used. It will be used in two areas. First, to enhance arts knowledge of PWDs, and second, to help persons with disabilities who have great artistic potential strive for excellence and develop their career in performing visual and creative arts. We're now preparing the operation of the fund, and we'll set up a secretariat for the fund and also the reference committee. We hope that in the fourth quarter of this year we can launch the fund. Thank you. I welcome views from members. Thank you. Let me first clarify. Can you please clarify? We are talking about two funds here, and also these are also funding applications. Are going to apply for funding from the FC. We are not decided yet as to which procedure we will go for, but we will follow the established procedures. If you talk about the established procedures, then you have to apply for funding from the Finance Committee. Not necessarily, but that's one possibility. Perhaps colleagues can supplement later, because if you are not going to apply for the approval of FFC, then there may be some insufficiency. Well, LegCo for sure must have a say over the establishment of the fund, but we will leave it to the future as to which route we will go down. Under the Public Finance Ordinance, government officials have the responsibility to clarify here. I rarely put this question to officials at panel meetings, because usually officials will tell us whether the paper will then go to PWSC or the FC. But then the secretary here has a different view, and I'm a bit concerned. So can I ask for the Secretariat's assistance under the relevant legislation? Should they go directly to the FC or what? The Secretariat inquired with the administration earlier on, and the written reply is, as in the past, policy bureaus will consult the relevant panels or other committees in the council in due course. And under the Public Finance Ordinance, the administration will sort the funding approval of the council. So in both the written reply and verbal reply of the secretary, there is no mention of how they're going to establish the fund. Since the secretary is here, can he tell us what is his consideration? We'll talk about $1.25 billion in total. That is no small sum of money. So we expect the administration to go down the usual route, and that is to go to FC. Or will you have another way of doing it? Because if they're not going to seek FC support, this may well be the last time we can discuss the two funds. Secretary, what I can say is, well, as what I said in the written reply, we will follow the usual procedures, and there will be vetting by the council as regards the procedures. Which procedure to do, I can't give you a definite answer today, but there must be some basis. You have to have some basis for your decision. You cannot just, well, let's see, let's wait and see, or let's see what's the time frame. Secretary, Can you tell us what are your considerations for going or not going to FC? Well, this is not actually for the Labour and Welfare Bureau to decide. Of course, we can advise, but the FSTB colleagues will make the appropriate decision according to the relevant rules. So the decision doesn't rest with you, not with me, is with the FSTB. All right. So it is for FSTB to decide. But how about your own view, Secretary? Do you think that this item should be put to the FC? Because not all members of the Council are members of the FS panel. The reason why we examine items at FC is some members are non-panel members are members of FC. Of course, we very much want this $1.25 billion to be approved. It's just that in the process, we want to give the administration more suggestions and advice. So we mean well rather than harm. Do you understand that? So usually it will be by approval by the whole Council. As regards through what means, I'm afraid I cannot give you a definite answer this morning. As far as my understanding, now I am novice in the administration. As far as I understand, some of the items might be approved through the appropriation bill. My understanding is it depends on the timing, the scale of the project concerned, and also views expressed by the community and the Council. These are some considerations. Mr. Ray Chen, are you on the same point? I'm not asking the Secretary to give us a definite answer today or to give us a full explanation. But can our Secretariat or the FSTB tell us how many different ways can there be other than going to the FC directly after this panel? And in addition to the appropriation bill, are there other ways? And are there precedents? I think it would be better if we can have this knowledge before we start our discussion of this paper. Because it appeared that the Secretary had not exhausted all the possible routes for getting the money to set up the funds. So the Secretary hasn't explained to us how many different ways there are to obtain money for setting up the fund. Secretary, as far as I understand, going to the FC is one possible means, and some may be through the appropriation bill. Whether there is a third way, I am not in the know. So I think he's already told you it's either A or B, although he is not decided as to whether he should go for A or B. He has answered this a number of times. This fund is for the end of this year. There should be ample time. So it's for implementation in the fourth quarter of 2018. Of course, the Secretary is not going to decide now, unless he is of the view that examination by FC is counterproductive. But I have never seen any difficulty with FC when it comes to funding applications so positive in nature, unless we're talking about white elephant projects. Of course, the Secretary and also the FSTB are entitled to do whatever they like, but please do not do anything to undermine legislative-executive relations, because what you do here will only cause us to be more skeptical of government intentions. All right, I think members' advice has been heard by the Secretary and recorded in our minutes. Let's return to our paper. Mr. Poon Shiu Peng and Dr. Kwok Ka-ki, Mr. Ray Chen. Oh, no. And all right, I'll give the floor to Mr. Poon first. Thank you, Chairman. 4 minutes each, okay. In principle, I support the use of INT products to take care of our elderly and PWDs. The paper proposes to set up an INT fund for application and an arts fund. The INT Bureau launched a $500 billion for INT quality living in May last year to use INT products to provide more convenience to members of the public. Now, this fund, INT fund, will provide about $1 billion, and the Secretary expects to launch it in the fourth quarter of this year. In your paper, we understand that there are two categories of products. The first is newly developed products. What about the original INT fund? Is there any overlapping or any relationship between the two types of funds? Because for the fund launched last year, there is R&D development, and here is also for procurement and hiring. And to support the operation of the fund, you're going to set up an assessment panel. I'd like to know when the assessment panel will be established. All right. We have the two funds together will cost us $1.25 billion, and they will start to operate in 2019-20. Now, if the two funds are very well received, and have you assessed how long the two funds are going to last? Regarding the INT fund for quality living, I understand that it covers a number of areas. Some may be related to welfare services, but in setting up the INT fund for application, we want to ensure that there is no overlapping with the other fund. Perhaps Ms. Pang from the SWT can assist. Thank you. We have discussed with the INT Bureau earlier. So we have come to the agreement that for the two funds, they should avoid overlapping as far as possible. For the INT Fund for Better Living, there is an R&D element there. And whereas for our INT fund application, it would not cover development and research. And their fund can benefit individuals, whereas for us, we only benefit welfare units. And for the INT Fund for Better Living, they will only cover products where R&D is done in Hong Kong. But for our fund, although we do not cover R&D, but if there are projects developed overseas, and if they are considered useful in Hong Kong, or if we need to try them out to see how they can be adapted to suit our local requirements, we will allow applicant units to cooperate with overseas companies in applying for an INT fund for application, but the products have to be adjusted to suit our local use. Regarding the establishment of the assessment panel, I think this is very relevant to the first questions members asked. While we are carrying out the preparation, because the fund has not yet been approved, we cannot set up the assessment panel yet. So the panel can only be appointed after the fund is approved by this council. As regards how long the money can last, it is difficult for us to estimate here because we cannot estimate the response. But the sooner the money is exhausted, is depleted, the better. This reflects that there is a great demand for such money in the community. And if the money is depleted very soon, we will discuss with LegCo to provide more funding. Dr. K.K. Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. I support both funds, but I want to be more specific. There are a few elements in the fund. One is for procuring software and hardware. I guess that will be equipment for monitoring the physical condition of the elderly residents or inmates, and the other products might be equipment. I've met with HKCSS people, and they talk about the use of equipment to help the care of inmates. So, do you expect that most of the applications will be for procurement of software and hardware, or for helping staff to take care of the service recipients? Well, for software, if it is mainly software, our lotteries fund can help. But when it comes to both software and hardware, let me cite an example. For instance, you'd like to purchase a robot from a certain country to work in Hong Kong. There must be a software to support the operation of the robot. There must be some adaptation. For instance, if the operating language is Japanese, I think most of the money will be for procurement of hardware, but there will be spending on the software as well. For the application of ICT, the SWT has gotten other mechanism to approve such applications.
So that means I think mostly equipment is involved. For example, the advanced robotic technology from Japan, Taiwan, and Europe. We're talking about not a small sum of money, 1 billion. And I know that some store operators would like to have a share of the amount. Well, of course, when government departments spend money, we welcome that. Businessmen also welcome that. We're talking about 1 billion. How can we make sure that the money will be well spent? The Secretary said that there would be an advisory council monitoring the work. Now, I'm worried that at the end of the day, not the elders and NGOs can benefit, but the technological companies will benefit rather. Now, apart from Council of Social Service, is there other NGO that can help? Well, if it is purely a commercial organization, we will be worried. Secretary, so these questions are asked at the very beginning. Please, for NGOs that are now providing services, quite many of them are very active in bringing in equipment and technology. But of course, there is resource constraints, so that's why we want to set up this fund. I think members are worried. Of course, we won't use up all 1 billion at one go. It depends on the vetting work of the panel. Of course, we have to make sure that public funds are well spent, and we have to be cautious. At the same time, we need to leave some leeway, because in the application of technology, there may be some risk. Now, there are things that if you don't try to start if you don't start to try on, you don't know whether it can be applied. So there is the system, the process involved. And so we also have to look at the vetting panel members' background. These can help to make sure that public funds will be well spent. But please allow more room, because if you don't allow any risk, then there are some items or projects that cannot be initiated. Before Dr. Fernando Zhang, well, in fact, just now I've forgotten one point. According to Rule 83A, in panel meetings, members cannot move motion or amendment or speak on an item with direct or indirect pecuniary interest unless if members declare the nature of the interest. So members, if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interest related to this item, then you should declare the nature of the interest before you speak. This is about declaration of interest. Dr. Fernando Zhang, Chairman, we do welcome and support these two funds, including both the IT fund as well as the Arts Development Fund for persons with disabilities. Now, for the $1 billion that will be used on buying technological products in private rehabilitation or personal care homes, well, we definitely support this direction. I have two ideas. First, the environment of some private homes is still very bad, and there is a severe shortage of manpower. As a result, many elders and disabled people are neglected. They are being restrained in an undue way. Many diapers are used in replacing or changing diapers and cleaning of wounds or taking them to the toilet. There is severe lack of such service. These are basic needs and very low-tech in nature. But on the other hand, you may be bringing in very cutting-edge robots. So I find this ridiculous. Besides, well, technology can help us, but the point is, who can technology really help? In elderly care homes, 70% of these homes are private, and to these organizations, it is really a business. And the fund will help some homes with bought places, and the equipment will be used to increase business. This is quite clear. According to some reports, some companies have bought automatic bathing machines, and the biggest rehabilitation home in Hong Kong has already bought some feeding machines. Well, I am a backward person. I don't know how these feeding machines are operated, but we're talking about people service. So if there is technology that will streamline the business, so people can be bathed very easily and feeding can be done very easily. I don't know whether personal service will be replaced by these technological applications. Then if service capacity is bigger, then these companies can make more money. I think the government should seriously look into this. The technology has been there for a long time. Long time ago, there was an invention that if a person has wet the bed, it will be detected and the carers will know that it's time that their diapers be changed. Well, but then not many care homes can use this technology. The technology has been there for a long time. It's a matter of how it is used and how technology can complement human work. So when you offer funding, you have to pay attention to whether there is still the people-oriented service. If technology is used just to increase business volume, and if the people-oriented nature will no longer be there, then this will be very disappointing. Thank you for the point. Perhaps in the future you can also take a look at the use of such technological products. But so far, I haven't seen this kind of streamlined arrangement. When it comes to bathing machine, the elders really enjoy the use of such machines. If you go to Japan and Taiwan and take a look at it, it's not like a factory. Both the service carers and service users will enjoy a better relationship with the use of this machine. Concerning the application of technology, it has to be down to earth. Even if the concept itself is very good, if it cannot be applied or if it cannot tie in with the service process, then it's not helpful. My understanding is that most technologies can alleviate the burden of work of carers. For example, helping people to get off bed, and I think there are quite a lot of technologies that can alleviate the work of the carers. Well, if there is another technological exhibition, then perhaps we can go and visit it. Yes, in November we will organize this exhibition again, and we have more time to prepare this time. We hope to attract participation from more countries so that there will be more products that can help our disabled people. Concerning the machine that helps people go upstairs, well, even though it is very advanced, it cannot be used in old tenement building, especially when the steps are very high. In some old tenement buildings, the steps are irregular and not even, so there may be a risk. For those buildings built before 1987, at that time there was no accessibility standard. Now there are some newer buildings in which this kind of staircase machine can be used. Okay, if there are no further questions, I have questions. Colleagues asked a number of questions about technology that can help the elderly. Now, I would like to comment on the Arts Development Fund for the Disabled. Well, I think this is good news because it can help the socially disadvantaged. I think even though this fund is new, the concept itself is old. It's like the Art Development Fund. It is aimed at identifying talents and making art more popular. As Dr. Fernando Zhang said, ants will go to wherever there is honey, and many organizations may apply for this fund, but then the disabled may become supporting characters. The protagonists may be the able-bodied people. So a group of disabled will play supporting roles but not the protagonists. So they are just used to apply for funds. So I am worried about this kind of pseudo disabled art. You may think that I am overly worried. In the UK, there is a very popular art group, Mind to Get, which is an art group of the disabled. It is like a role model in the UK and Europe. They attach much importance to art for the disabled. So they are leading in their kind. I hope that you will spend some time to get some understanding about this Mind to Get art group. They display their art development in Taiwan, so I encourage you to invite them to come. If you are interested, I can arrange someone who had worked in Mind to Gap in the past to share his experience in the UK. So I think that should be regarded as a very good example in development of art for the disabled. So what do you think? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Any other comments on these funds? The IT fund as well as the Arts Development Fund for persons with disabilities. If not, then thank you, Bureau. Since both funds involve money, so do you in principle support this funding proposal from the government? We will have chance to discuss it in FC. So do you in principle support this funding proposal from the government? Yes. Any objection? Dr. Fernando Zhang, I support. But I hope. Okay, they talked about Hong Kong CSS. And they are working on a mechanism. I hope that in the mechanism there will be some user representatives. I will support them on this basis. So do you want an undertaking from the Bureau that there will be user representatives in the mechanism? You want a response from the Bureau? Chairman, this mechanism will not be created by Hong Kong CSS. We will consult the social welfare sector, including the CSS, because they are commissioned by SWD to promote the work of technology, use of technology for the elderly and the disabled. But they are not the organization to do vetting. We will surely consider users' views. Well, there is a secretariat and a vetting panel. If all the members are government officials, that's not good. I think there must be some users in it. Will all members be government officials? No, there will be users and professionals and organizations. So the secretary said that there will definitely be user representatives. So in principle, we agree to these two funds. No objection. Okay. Now, let's move on to the next agenda item. Hong Kong Rehabilitation Program Plan. Thank you, government officials, for coming. Okay, he will stay, right. Hong Kong Rehabilitation Program Plan. So from now on till 1 p.m., there will be a public hearing, and then another session from 2 to 3:55. 74 deputations are going to speak, so this will take long time. Let's invite the deputations to come in. At first, we planned to start this item at 10:55, so we're a bit early. It doesn't matter. The deputations can come in. On 11th December, during our meeting, the Bureau briefed us on this plan. Some colleagues asked for a public hearing, so that's why this public hearing will be conducted now. Every time when we discuss rehabilitation program, many organizations have comments to make. I believe they have a lot of expectations. I always refer to this white paper dated 1995. Better Tomorrow for All. That's the name of this white paper. People do expect that there will be a lot of improvements in rehabilitation service. Members said that this term, rehabilitation, is outdated. Well, if we follow the UN, then we should say, for example, service for the disabled, instead of rehabilitation service. Please be seated. Secretary, is there any report from you?
Chairman, just a few words. As you all know, the rehab program plan was an undertaking given by the previous administration. We would start our work after consultation. Under the RAC, we set up a review committee or task force to formulate a program plan. We'll invite PWD groups, self-help groups, parents groups, carer groups, and professionals from different sectors and relevant government departments to participate in the working group. And under the working group, there will be different subgroups looking at various aspects of the services. We believe there are three important guiding principles. Adopting a lifespan approach from cradle to grave in examining the rehabilitation and care needs of persons with disabilities. And number two, promoting cross-sectoral collaboration in providing diversified services for persons with disabilities and achieving barrier-free environment, and also conducting in-depth review and extensive consultation for stakeholders. It refers to different stages of needs and different stages of development and different kinds of services. To have systematic and thorough discussion on various rehabilitation service needs of PWDs. So we will conduct the review along these three guiding principles and in three stages. First, we we have the scoping stage, and then the formulation stage, and then the consensus building stage. We hope to spend 2 years on that. We know that it is very challenging. We believe that in the RPP, the difficulties are even higher than our EPP. And I welcome the views of the deputations. Now, at the previous meeting, we were told that it would not be possible to divulge which university was going to lead the study. Can that be disclosed now? Yes. The Poly University, the PolyU, will have a team to take the lead in the study. Yes, they will come and listen because they will take the lead in the study. What is the membership of the steering committee? Are there a steering committee? Will the Rehab Commissioner steer the meeting? Rehab Commissioner. Chairman, apologies that it started earlier than the scheduled time. As in the policy address, the CE has tasked the Rehab Advisory Committee to work on this, and we are now forming a working group under the RAC. The RAC will have members incorporating some of the members of the RAC, representatives from the rehab section, representatives of PWD groups, parent groups, and also professionals. There are also representatives from the HKCSS. We want to cast the net wider. Apart from the traditional social service sector, we also want to incorporate experts and expertise from related sectors like the medical and healthcare sector and also other academics. Mr. Leung, you refer to different sectors. Will LegCo members be included in the steering committee? Chairman, as I've said earlier, the working group, the review working group, is under preparation. We have yet to announce the membership finally. Well, we have given our views, and we hope to have user representatives in the working group, review working group, not just the familiar faces. We want to have many more people from different backgrounds. Apologies that we have advanced the start of the meeting of this item so that many representatives of the deputations have not arrived yet. I just want to remind the representatives of the deputations that you can make use of the earphones. 0 is a floor channel, channel 1 Cantonese, channel 2 English, channel 3 Putonghua. I will invite you to speak according to the list, and each is given 3 minutes. Please pay attention that what you speak here is not protected by the LegCo powers and privileges ordinance. Your written submissions are also not protected by the LegCo powers and privileges ordinance, and therefore you are responsible for what you say and write. Now, those who are in the public hearing, please pay attention to the guideline for people listening to the meeting in the public gallery. We can provide a copy of the guidelines to you. Please take note of that. If you have not provided a written submission, you can do so after the meeting for our record, and we will circulate your written submissions as well. There are rules for the LegCo, and if you are not allowed to use any or to broadcast any or audio tracks, and if you want to make any submissions, you can do so, and you can ask our colleagues to help you. Please make good use of the time. Each of you is given 3 minutes. If I may invite Ms. Yao to speak first. Am I getting through? She is the representative of the Association of Women with Disabilities Hong Kong. Is it getting through now? Yes, thank you. I speak on behalf of Association of Women with Disabilities Hong Kong. We want to speak on the RPP. We have the following suggestions. First, on residential care. We want to protect PWDs so that they can be given equal treatment and opportunities. Sexual harassment and sexual assaults should not be tolerated. In recent years, we have come across such serious situations. The Sex Discrimination Ordinance was passed in 1996, more than 10 years ago, and the Code of Practice issued by the SWD has no clear guidelines, and supervision is not adequate. We hope that the administration will tighten the supervision of these rules and also step up inspection so that the public and private RCHEs will not be plagued with the problem of sexual harassment. The life expectancy of women is longer than men, and with aging population, the administration should adopt a long-term view in planning for residential care, and there should be different types of extended support. Many are cared for at home. And caring at home is very important. As for daycare and community support, they are all necessary and should be further developed. The carers, and also the female carers in particular, have a very heavy burden. The present arrangement is that either you can only apply for only one type of support. If you've obtained daycare support allowance, then you will not be able to get the carer's living support allowance. We hope that in considering the care for the PWDs, the carer should also be taken into account. Our association has been established for 17 years. We are the first to pay attention to self-help groups, to self-help PWDs, self-help female PWDs. We need long-term support. At present, the cap is $450,000 per 2 years, and that imposes a constraint on our development. We hope that the Women's Commission will be given more power. Now, the Women's Commission has been provided resources, but that is not enough to provide reform measures which comply with gender mainstreaming principles. We hope that real power can be given to the Women's Commission and strengthen gender mainstreaming measures. Thank you, Ms. Lau. The policy address, and I hope also in the budget there will be some good news for self-help groups, not just $450,000 for 2 years. Have I made it wrong, Dr. Law, or is there already a plan? We have to wait for the budget, and you know the outcome. is not. I'm not in a position to answer the question raised by the chairman. Thank you. If Mr. Tam doesn't mind, then I will ask Mr. Chen Kai to speak first because Mr. Cheng wants to leave earlier. Mr. Chen Kai, please. Mr. Cheng Kai, please. Okay, we will fix that for you. My apologies, Mr. Zhang. Chairman, good morning. Good morning, Dr. Law. I'm Chang Kai. I want the administration to set up a barrier-free fund. You should subsidize small shops to improve their barrier-free facilities. 99% of the or 95% of the shops on the ground floor are not barrier-free. In the past, even if there was they were well barrier-free accessible, and after the shop closed down, then the barrier-free access facility was also gone. So there should be a fund for the provision of barrier-free access, so the small shops can apply for an assistance. And if they don't provide that, they can breach. They will be caught for breaching the law, and that will go a long way to help. A barrier-free access fund. At meetings of different panels, we did discuss this. For example, market facilities. Next, Mr. Tam. The concern group for people with moderate mental disability. We have been fighting for the interests of those who are mildly mentally handicapped. We have been asking for change in policy and also residential homes. We want to speak on self-advocacy of the mentally handicapped. Before I become an advocate, I represented Hong Kong to participate in swimming competitions, and I am also an ambassador of the sports associations in promoting sports among the disabled, in order to build their self-confidence. And I have learned to promote sports among the PWDs. In fact, PWDs, sportsmen and women, have won many medals for Hong Kong, and yet few pay attention to that. I set up a Facebook page to promote sports among the PWDs. Hong Kong has to hear the voice of the PWDs, and therefore I do that. And that's why I joined the concern group. I have a sense of mission. Every time I came before this council, I put on this Paralympic jacket. This is to promote this mission, and that is to promote the beliefs and spirit of Paralympics. Now I want to share with you my experience. The experience of the PWDs cannot be replaced by anybody, or by the the RPP should have the working group on RPP should have advocates from the PWDs as representatives, rather than just having parent group representatives. Another issue is that if they want to participate, and then how many mentally handicapped persons know that there is such a working group, and only 2 advocacy groups. know that there is a working group. I hope that members of this council and also deputations will pass my message to special schools, family members of the mentally handicapped and also related social workers, so that the mentally handicapped will speak up for themselves and tell them what we need instead of having them thrusting things down our throat. Now, this is a slogan of the mentally handicapped. It's about empowerment. Next is Ms. Wong. Ms. Wong Chi-Yan. I have 5 points. The board play scheme for RCHEs can be incorporated in the Guangdong scheme. There should be homes for the audio impaired. Physical disability homes and mentally disability homes should be separated. They have different needs, so they should not be mixed together. Non-emergency ambulance service should not have an age limit. I don't understand why they set an age limit at 60 or above, and there are many rules preventing me from taking a non-emergency ambulance service to the clinic. At present, they only provide the service if the building is not barrier-free, and there should be the provision of sign language, not just through TV, and CSSA recipients should be given exemption. Because if they to take a lesson on sign language, they will have to pay $500, and that is not affordable. Next month, if I have my hearing checked, my ear checked, then I may be regarded as hearing impaired. I'm really anxious. On the 4th, there was my examination. It said that my legs were having problems and could not be helped, and then together with hearing impairment, and then I think I need sign language, the help of sign language, but if the charge is $500 per session, that would be too much for me. I really want to learn sign language.
However, I have not been formally certified by an MO that I really need it. I have to wait until next month. So during the period, I'd like to learn the two systems. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome the Dr. Mo, the research team from the Polytechnic University has just arrived. I'd like to invite Mr. Jill Ho Lim. Good afternoon. Good morning. Now from 9 to 10, you have an item on this. I'd like to speak on this, and that is about the RPP. I'd like to know whether it intends to remove people with chronic diseases. Is your intention to cut welfare for the chronically ill? And now for the RPP, can you include, now even not cutting welfare, can you include those suffering from Mediterranean, anemia, kidney diseases, and also the chronically ill? Can they be regarded as POWs? Because the chronically ill are in a very difficult situation. And will you follow ICIF and follow the US and the European model? Will you adopt their definition for disability and deal with and make some adaptation based on our situation in Hong Kong? And fourthly, how do you define PWDs? we have got some of us studying in a special school and also applying for employment placement with for the disabled, but they're not eligible to receive CSSA. So I don't know how do you define a disability. The fifth point is, well, disabilities that is not so visible. Will the government take care of them? Some of them are not receiving a DA. However, under your guidance, medical officer will decide whether whether disability allowance or permit will be issued. Now, I suffer from Mediterranean anemia. I've been told by the doctor that I will not be granted DA and also a certificate to prove that I'm disabled. In fact, the two are separated. I don't know why the MO has refused to sign it for me. And because the criteria adopted by the government are too harsh. And thirdly, for the chronically ill, they may not be able to get DA. But I have said many times, how come the government doesn't set up the reimbursement system on a fully accountable basis for medical consumables that they need? I'd like to know whether the disability certificate is packed with the DA. Are the two associated or are they totally separate? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Invisible discrimination. Next. Mr. Mok Yun Kwan. Thank you, Chairman. Well, even PWDs have the need for clothing, accommodation, so on and so forth. However, they face more complicated issues than their able-bodied counterparts. It's difficult to elaborate on all of them within 3 minutes. So I'd like to use this problem-solving approach. First, identification, and that is the definition of disability. Different government departments and different ordinances have different definitions, and they are outdated. For instance, DA, they adopt the employment ordinance enacted more than 5 decades ago. Some invisible disabilities are not eligible. There have been a revision to the definition and by the UN as well, and therefore we must modernize the definition and to ensure consistency among government departments. Secondly, the actual status. In the past few years, there have been a regular survey of PWDs. I think they can make projections of this population so that they do not rely on guesswork when it comes to the provision of resources, and they don't have to act retrospectively when supply is insufficient to meet demand. Thirdly, collective wisdom. We should enhance the proportion of PWDs in advisory bodies, and the participation from different government departments and bureaus is necessary. In 2005, there was a review, and only 8 government departments and public bodies had representatives in the working group. The Housing Department, Highways Department were not rated, and the LCSD that provides services and rehabilitation and leisure facilities for the disabled, they were also excluded. And as a result, there is a gap between expectations and the provision of services. And 5, self-help groups. The government pays lip service to support for self-help groups, and these subvention scheme for them is just a drop in the ocean when it comes to the actual expenses. And it is important that we do regular surveys on the operation of self-help groups. The EOC provides a subvention for them, but the resources is limited, and application will only be approved once in 4 years. And the review scheme government undertaking. Since the scheme was announced in 2007, the government has never conducted a review on its operation. There is an annual meeting between the rehabilitation sector and also the administration, but every time the administration would just rehash what government policy is, it is not helpful in addressing our concerns. I suggest that the Commissioner for Labour and also other officials meet at least once with the rehabilitation sector. Other departments should also be party to it. And there should also be a midterm review of the RPP and make adjustments where necessary. And then 10 years after the program is announced, there should be another round of review. Thank you. ICF, for those watching webcasts, they may not know what it is. ICF is an WHO is international classification of functioning disabilities and health. It was approved by UN and WHO a long time ago. Mr. Lam Chan, the Alliance on concern for the state of home carers. Thank you. I am Lam Chan. I represent the Alliance. The government is going to conduct a consultation on the RPP in 2018. The last consultation is done in 2007, and back then we were not a party to the UN Convention on Persons with Disabilities. So back then the consultation did not have the perspective of the UN Convention. We hope that in 2018 we will bear in mind the UN Convention and see how it can be implemented in Hong Kong and how we can monitor the progress of implementation. We're very concerned about PWDs living in the community. Many of them are getting chronic diseases younger than it used to be, and some of them may not fulfill the definition of disabilities. So home care and community care are most important. The Alliance have taken part in the ESPP consultation. However, in the process, we saw some problems. We don't want them to be repeated in this consultation of RPP first. Public consultation is about collecting views, and you should engage stakeholders. For ESPP, the consultancy team selected some organizations to take part, and some of the venues were not easily accessible. So for RPP, you should consider the level of participation from different categories of disabilities. And all 16 sessions, I'd like to know whether they're open to the public or whether it's by invitation only. The consultation will be done by a consultancy team. Will the administration consider whether the team is knowledgeable with the needs of the disabled, and do they understand our concerns? There should not be any preconceived ideas when it comes to the consultation. For instance, the government can't say that, well, there isn't enough money in the future to provide public services. So you must also look at the spending, and there should be enhanced allowance for carers. The last consultation of RPP was in 2007. It may be another 10 years before another round of consultation will be conducted. I hope the administration can really address the concerns of the stakeholders. Thank you. All right, Madam Lam, you asked some questions about the consultancy. We welcome representatives from the consultancy team here, and I expect them to address these issues later. Ms. Lee Feng King. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to say something about dementia. On the 11th of December, the Welfare Services Panel convened a meeting on this. RPP is a program plan. but you must have the statistics of those who demand these services before you know what and how to do it. However, the government hasn't got the necessary statistics yet, and this is disappointing. And it is the government's responsibility to find out the statistics. You should not push the responsibility to NGOs. Now, we have 130,000 persons suffering from dementia. Only 28,000 are receiving service. That means over 100,000 are not receiving the services they need. The LPP must clearly state how they can increase the current capacity of service by fourfold, because by 2018 the population who need this service may be over 100,000. And starting from last February, you started this scheme for dementia. We heard that it would be regularized. However, it was just a pilot scheme. After a few months, and even before any review, it's going to be regularized. Isn't it too rash? What are the merits and demerits and deficiency of the scheme? We need information before it can be regularized, and we don't know what the government is going to use the scheme to appease the stakeholders that require these services, and some of them are not eligible for subvention for community services. Some NGOs are providing self-financing services that cost us $500 per day. Grassroots cannot afford them. And we may be asked to use community vouchers instead. But do you know that these vouchers are available, but services are not? There isn't sufficient service capacity in the market. I understand that the waiting list for government services is over 100. So service capacity is a big problem. I hope that LPP can address, can provide recommendations on early onset of dementia, and there should be specialized services serving the dementia patients and their parents. I got a lot more to say, but I've only got 3 minutes. I hope LPP will not be like the ESLP, and I hope it will not just be a fake consultation. Thank you. Mr. Lee Ji-hong, Parents Association of People Suffering from Severe Mental Handicap. Now, the UN Convention started in 2008, and it was rectified, or it started to take effect in PRC, including Hong Kong SAR. The purpose is to ensure that all PWDs can enjoy equal rights, and they should be duly respected, and the development of rehabilitation services should keep up with times, and there must be a comprehensive policy covering education, social welfare, medical and healthcare. But services in Hong Kong are very compartmentalized, not comprehensive enough, and then it's very passive, and then there is overlapping of resources. So people who need the services are at a loss, and they are not given the support they need, and their life in the community face a lot of challenges, including barrier-free access, medical services, and support for carers, and financial support, and so forth. A lot has to be improved. Parents would want their children to live in the community as far as possible, but we do not have enough community centers, and there is no 24-hour support services, no respite for parents in case of emergency, and there aren't enough places to meet the demand. There is no emergency respite care services. Some have difficulties. They need to use, they have a stoma, and some of them have swallowing difficulties, but other functions are good, and they have to be hospitalized or institutionalized. As a result, they cannot live in the community because the services are not people-oriented enough. The government talked about support for self-help groups, but the financial support is minimal. In fact, they are very important when it comes to sustainable services. And all working groups are appointed by the government. There is no transparency, and people have criticized the representativeness of these organizations, and there is no participation of PWDs. This is against the UN Convention. Now we must set up a commission for the disabled, and there should also be a program plan for the disabled. And we must ensure that the UN Convention is being implemented in Hong Kong. We must have case management measures so that PWDs can be treated fairly. And then there should be comprehensive policy for provision of education, social welfare, and medical health care services so that they can also live a meaningful life. And you should also look at the need of carers. You must have specific measures to support the development of self-help groups. Thirdly, there must be a transparent and acceptable way of forming working groups, advisory groups to serve the disabled. Have you got a written submission? All right, we can follow up your recommendations. Mr. Chen Chi-hei from CNR of Rehabilitation Society. Thank you. In formulating LPP, the most important thing is how the administration views PWDs. Now, if they value PWDs, they should have a more specific plan. In the past, they view PWDs with a medical model. In fact, we should focus on PWDs' participation in the community. Culture has changed, and technology advancement has greatly changed the way PWDs can be involved in society, and therefore policies should reflect the reality. For instance, $2 traffic fare concession, and also the definition of disabilities and rare diseases. I think in self-help groups we have heard a lot of comments on this, and the definition is unclear. As a result, government departments are fragmented, and the LWB, the medical and the Department of Health have got their own policies, but they're not doing a good job because there is no coordination and consensus among them. I think the most important point about the LPP is the definition of disabilities. There should be clearer definitions, and I think we should use the ICF as a reference. And then self-help groups have reflected to us that they need not just money, and as regards the extra amount of financial resources they need, there should be long-term planning on the part of the administration.
In relation to employment over the past years, there was only 2%, and this percentage is coming down. This is not acceptable. Many public organizations and departments are given government funds. So why can't these departments adopt mandatory quota system? Besides, we hope the government will pay more attention to support for carers and also retirement protection to recognize their contribution. Besides, for barrier-free facilities, now the Highways Department, Planning Department, and Housing Department may not have enough coordination. There are barrier-free officers, but how can there be some standards, unified standards? Well, this consultation is only preliminary in nature, so on rehabilitation there should be a more comprehensive consultation in different ways so that the disabled can also take part. In the past, there was review of rehabilitation program, but I hope the government can give a clear account of past implementation of the plan. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Choi Shing-hin from DAB. Thank you, Chairman. The last review happened 10 years ago. during the past period, there were major changes in our society. So the plan should be reviewed and unreasonable measures should be amended so that this rehabilitation plan can keep up with time. And more appropriate services can be provided. DAB supports a review of this plan. Besides, the disabled has to wait for 2 to 3 years to even 10 years. Even if they accept home care, there is still unmet demand. So the government should not wait till the completion of this review. I think there should be reasonable waiting time. Besides, there should be an advanced plan so that in the land grant terms, for example, conditions on building service homes should be included. Now, there should be barrier-free traffic and healthcare support, and then the carers subsidy should be increased. Hong Kong is a modernized society, so I think there should be more updating or upgrading in relation to technology for the disabled. Then for those who are not mentally capable, I think further legal protection should be offered. In recent years, there were suspected cases in which the mentally handicapped had been sexually abused. So in fact, there are loopholes. I think the voluntary registration scheme should be changed into mandatory registration so that those who are not mentally capable can be given enough protection. In the policy address, there was a mention of public trust. I think it can offer additional protection for the mentally handicapped. And when their parents or carers pass away, they can get financial protection from this trust. I think this scheme should be implemented so that parents and carers can have a peace of mind. Besides, society's burden can also be reduced. In Singapore, there is this kind of trust with lower threshold and lower management fee. Every year, the organizations are given funding. But then for SARG since 2016, early 16, the progress has been very slow. The Down syndrome patients and the mentally retarded cannot act as fast, and so I think the trust should be set up as soon as possible. Finally, we hope that there should be wider use of IT to enhance the independence of these disabled, and living quality can be enhanced. Besides, there should be better rehabilitation equipment so that the recovered patients can integrate into society as soon as possible. Next, Mr. Chang Hin Kei from Public Transport Study Group. We're set up in 2011. We had been paying attention to different issues about the traffic. Well, I would like to focus on Chapter 11 about traffic and access, so that there will be better barrier-free environment for the disabled. In fact, the disabled has more difficult mobility than the able-bodied people. When it comes to taxis that can cope with wheelchairs or limousine service, there are not much such services. So can the government consider imposing as a mandatory requirement that taxis must be able to take in wheelchair-bound people? Technology develops fast. So when it comes to supplementary service like announcement of arrival, bus arrival, and so on, this makes things very convenient for the disabled. But then the government does not attach much importance to these services. Even if it breaks down, the service can still continue. But then if there is no reminder for the disabled people to get off the bus, it is very inconvenient. So it all depends on how the government treats the disabled. In the past 10 years, in almost all franchised buses, wheelchair-bound people can take it, with the exception of the New Lantau bus. Now, when it comes to green minibuses and non-franchised buses, in most of the cases, the disabled cannot take these vehicles. So for low platform buses, well, when we read the program, we know that when it comes to taxis for wheelchair-bound people and low-floor buses, well, these items are in the last program. But then the Bureau has been too rigid, so that the progress of plan implementation has been affected. So when you amend this rehabilitation program, I hope that the Bureau can discuss with other relevant bureaus. So things should not only appear on papers, they should really be implemented right. So we want to see all these improvements on the road. Next, Mr. Yip Kin Kang. Thank you, Chairman. Today, many deputations referred to concrete policy details. I don't know how much opportunity will we have to take part in future consultation and review. Now, today, Dr. Low is here. I think you should take note of all points made by deputations, because perhaps in the future, we won't have the opportunity to raise our points in future review. Concerning mode of consultation, well, this is the first consultation after the Convention about the Disabled was signed. I want to know how much of the disabled perspective will be included. Now, for the UN Convention, it is an in-principle document, but how can it tie up all the different areas of consultation? There are some experts who have good understanding about the convention. For example, Dr. Low, how much understanding do you have about that convention? Has the government invited some experts or advocates of the convention to join the consultation team? We are very concerned about this. Then about the way of consultation. There will be 60 consultation sessions, but based on past ESVP experience, I think Dr. Law is very aware. So organizations were invited to attend the consultation session, and in each session, one topic will be discussed. But then there are so many topics related to rehabilitation. How many organizations will be invited, and how will they be invited in the past? For example, when comprehensive home care service was discussed, well, this is related to the disabled and disabled families. But then disabled groups are not invited. So I want to know how many disabled or advocates can be invited to join the consultation sessions. In the last rehabilitation program, there were no clear targets. This time, I think we have to treasure this opportunity. Now, when it comes to supply and demand of service and planning of service, we need some concrete figures. So what numbers should be achieved when? I think in this program we need these figures and timetable. And then concerning collection of data in relation to the disabled and the mentally handicapped, well, there may be some progress in collection of such data. But I want to know clearly what the progress is like. And will you consider ICF definition in gathering the data so that we will have clearer data? Thank you. About those 60 consultation sessions, how many of them will be public consultation sessions? How many are focused groups? For focused groups, which organizations will be invited? Let me remind you again, if you have written submissions, please give them to us. We will make sure that those submissions will reach the consultant team. Next, Mr. Lee Chi-hong. Good morning, Chairman, members. I have a few points to raise. After the disabled students graduate, well, recently there were many students graduating from special schools, and there is only one path for them, and that is sheltered workshop. They can take up employment in the market, but because they are disabled, they can only work in sheltered workshop. So in other countries, there are bigger quota for the disabled so that they can work together with able-bodied people. They can have more dignity. There are self-help organizations which find it difficult to apply for funding. I also have some self-help organizations, but in relation to funding and resources, we cannot get them because we are not able to get license. We find it difficult to apply for a license, so we face a lot of constraints and difficulties in our work. So I hope the government will pay more attention to self-help groups. Then about home assistance. Now I live alone, and I am on CSSA. So if I need to apply for home assistant, it's very difficult. I had waited for 10 years already. The NGO only offers me this service once a month, only for 1 hour every time. So the area of my apartment is 200 to 300 square feet. So how much cleaning can be done in 1 hour? I hope the government will increase funding and service so that needy people can enjoy home assistant service. Now the elderly enjoy the service together with the disabled. So the disabled will have to be on the same queue with the elderly. So can there be 2 queues really, so that the disabled can have more service available? Now regarding healthcare, when it comes to emergency vehicles or ambulances, why is it that electric wheelchairs cannot board the ambulance? Now, a wheelchair-bound person used to have an accident on the road, and then the electric wheelchair cannot board the ambulance, and it was told, and actually he had to spend some money to repair the electric wheelchair. You mean the electric wheelchair cannot board the ambulance? Both electric and non-electric wheelchairs cannot. So can there be some way for wheelchairs to be accommodated? To a certain extent, wheelchairs are like our legs. So it is not possible to separate the legs from the bodies, right? So later on, we can follow up this point. Next, Mr. Yan Chun Kit. Good morning. I have been paralyzed for 12 years. And during this period, some of the members of my organization and I myself are of the view that the DA is too low. The amount is only 1,600 to 3,000 odd. And right now, I think the allowance is totally not in line with purchasing power in society. When members make application, they have to rely on doctors' assessment. Every time in hospital, doctors have to see 100 follow-up patients. So when we attend follow-up visits, the doctor only refers to the computer record, and he will only do a very brief physical examination. So, for example, I'm on the low limit of DA. Some members cannot even apply. They won't be able to get it. So some members are not able to get the allowance. We suffer from contraction of muscles, and it is actually an incurable disease. Some disabled people can move, but then they only receive a very small amount of allowance. And they are asking whether the allowance can reach $2,500. And some disabled are not getting CSSA. So can we get a sum of money to buy healthcare consumables? I am on tubulation and I also need some consumables. Sorry, I don't know how to put it. Hospital authority only conducts tendering, and then usually the lowest bidder will get the contract.
Say, for example, the urine bag is very of poor quality and it leaks in just 1 or 2 weeks' time. And who is to pay for that? And the repair of wheelchair is also very expensive. Say, for example, the motor or the engine suffers from a problem, and then you have to pay a few $1,000s. And I pay $1,500 for my spectacles. I hope the administration will pay attention to the needs of the PWDs. I hope you really can be sympathetic. I hope that we can be given the disability allowance. Thank you. We've heard you loud and clear. Next is Mr. Yim, Direction Association for the Disabled. Now we provide service to the physically disabled. We have several suggestions. Though we may be reporting some of our speakers in terms of rehab service, I hope that the categories of disabled persons should be reorganized so as to review the needs of the PWDs and set appropriate targets. There should be a comprehensive review on the demand of services and the problem of long waiting time. And the administration should face up to aging. And also the services should take into account the situation of the service users. Rehab plan should take into account gender mainstreaming. That's been done with the Women's Commission, but we have not seen that done in the rehab services. There's a need to review the guidelines for RCHDs and enhance supervision and prevent the inmates from sexual abuses. As there should be a good coordination between discharge and also home care, and there should also be a short-term care so that carers can take leaves and reduce the pressure on carers. Psychological well-being of the carers and the PWDs should also be a matter of concern. There should also be allowance given to carers, and their service should be affirmed. There should be a medical coupon for the disabled so that they can choose primary care health service within the community. There's a need to enhance assistance to self-help groups so that self-help groups can get more manpower to promote the spirit of self-help. As for supported employment, there should be targets for employing PWDs. There should be a quota. Our suggestion is 2 to 4%, and that should be gradually increased. Employers should be encouraged to recruit PWDs, for example, tax concession. We hope that within this year, the design manual should be improved. In fact, the design manual was formulated just 10 years ago. There's a need to provide barrier access in terms of buses and also taxis. And also the negative stigma given to PWDs should be removed. So thank you, Chairman. I just want to follow up. Say, if you don't want the name PWD, then what is your suggestion? We may refer to the Taiwanese approach, but in fact they are also rethinking the nomenclature. Now you say the gender mainstreaming suggestions have been given by the Women's Commission. You are a member of the Women's Commission. Now you also asked for gender mainstreaming in rehab. Yes, in rehab program. Yes, indeed. Next is Ms. Lai of the HKCSS. Chairman, thank you. We have the following suggestion. First, on the consultancy arrangement. Now, RPP covers a very wide area. There shouldn't just be a single consultant to do the job. There should first be the setting up of working group, and then consultants should be appointed appropriately in respect of different subjects. It should be based on rights. The whole direction of development should be based on the UNCRPD, so that the PWDs can be fully involved in the review process. The rights to work should be respected, and we should also introduce IEF. In the previous RPP, there was the proposal of introducing ICF. We propose that there should be detailed discussion on the introduction of ICF to define to define disabilities. We propose to review the waiting list, the types of service, the connection between the different types of services. There should also be a demand and supply analysis or planning for the coming 3 to 5 years. There should also be financial commitment. New RPP should include a review mechanism to review policy targets and review dates. There should also be task groups formed on different issues. Different issues should have different task groups or task forces to discuss such matters. As for rehabilitation, it can be considered that through different stages of lifespan. There should also be inclusion of aging, children with special needs, application of new technology, carer support, support for multiple support for persons with multiple disabilities. There should be different channels for expressing views. The administration should listen to self-help groups, the different professional groups, and representatives of PWDs. Minutes of meeting should be put on website. Basing on recent issues and studies, the new RPP should develop on such basis, and targets should be formulated then. The HKCSS proposed a cross-sectoral, cross-departmental approach, and that should include the education sector and the medical and health sector. Relevant government departments, heads of relevant government departments should be involved in the consultation process so as to coordinate the efforts of different government departments. Thank you, Ms. Lai. In fact, many of the views are beyond the scope or portfolio of the LWB, such as hospitals and other services. Next is Mr. Low. The complexity of disabilities have make the issue cutting across many sectors. Now, with regard to rehabilitation, there are nuances. The PWDs don't just need rehabilitation. They need broader policy, and it should be rights-based. The concept of rehabilitation is outdated. It is based on the individual, and it has adopted a medical model. We should adopt a social model. One should not regard a PWD as a recipient of services. They do have rights, and they are able to contribute to society at large. That's a concept the administration should consider. The UN CRPD covers a wide area, including human rights, freedom, barrier-free access, individual autonomy, independence of persons, such and so on and so forth. So the PWDs don't just need disability, they don't just need rehabilitation. There should be vision, and there should also be improvement to the quality of life. In fact, European academics are looking into the concept of active citizenship. The PWD should be encouraged to be active citizens. They have 3 points in the vision: security, autonomy, and influence. Security includes health risk and other life risk. Are there adequate protection? Is there adequate protection to live a secure life? Autonomy means one can choose their own way of life. They live in the community. They have jobs. They can participate in culture and art activities. And influence means whether they can exert influence on policies and services that are given to them. Together with people with ability, we can move forward the world by leaving no one behind. The whole community should walk with the PWDs so that society can move forward. I hope they administration will rethink how they treat PWDs instead of just regarding them as help receivers. Yes, security, autonomy, and influence are keywords which we have to ponder. Next, if I may invite Ms. Lee Chi-ying to speak. Thank you, Chairman. I am a social worker supporting the carers of the mentally disabled. In 2016, the administration has added ICCMW support, but it is based on the on rehabilitation. And if the recipient refuses to receive any help, then the carers will not be given any help. The carers may have emotional problems or other problems, and they are not given any case social worker to support them. Existing services are not able to follow the principle of community rehabilitation and the rehabilitation of the policy of rehabilitation of the mentally ill. Well, I want to make a suggestion. The government should set up a peer support service to strengthen the family members of the PWDs so that they can be given adequate support. They have a lot of experience, and we should harness the social capital from this group of people. Now, there is our group I hope that there can be peer support, and there should be a pilot scheme, and the carers should participate in this peer support arrangement. They can share the experience. They can also provide training to other carers. Be they carers or PWDs, the experience is valuable, and it cannot be replaced by anybody. Social workers should be allowed to work with the carers and take note and make use of the experience of the PWDs and carers to enhance services. The carers should be encouraged, and they know they should not feel alone, and they should know that they are also cared for, and they can also receive support from others, and they will have more confidence in caring for their family members. The use of social capital is less costly than letting tragedy to happen. I hope the administration should face up to the needs of the carers and set up peer support service for the carers. Thank you. You may have noted that on the 4th of January, the Ombudsman's Office gave some view on ICCMW on the lack of support from to the carers. Next is Ms. Chen Lai Lai, the Alliance of Family Members who care for the PWDs. Now, the administration has proposed to set up a special trust fund, and the trustee is the Director of Social Welfare, who can provide a service so that the estates of parents can be managed after parents pass away, and funds can be released to the PWDs. The estate is spent on the long-term needs of the PWDs who are children of the parents who pass away. The special needs trust should include members of the families of the persons with special needs. In fact, in a report, it has been pointed out that more than 60% of the PWDs are cared by their parents or their spouses. The age difference between the carers and the care for is on average 21 years. We have asked the Pt1 to conduct a survey in 2016, and 30% of the family members who are carers are age 61 or above. In view of the aging of carers or the aging of family members, in the foreseeable future, the cost of social service will rise substantially. Carers or family members passed away, they don't want to pass on the responsibility of carrying the PWDs to the government. They hope that their savings can be used to care for their disabled children. But they are concerned when the PWDs have the estate, will they be able to make use of the money? If it is done through a private trust, can the rehabilitated persons be able to supervise the trust? We've make reference to overseas experience. Governments overseas have set up special trusts with there are specialists and also professionals who design a caring scheme for the beneficiaries. It's different from having a trust run by a bank or professional financial trustees. They charge high costs and they are not affordable by family members, and there is no regular supervision as to whether the trust meets the needs of the beneficiaries. For the above reasons, I urge the administration to include the family members of the mentally ill or ex-mentally ill into the special trust scheme so that there can be long-term protection to the livelihood of the PWDs.
Ms. Lee Po-Chan. Thank you, Chairman. I am a family member of PWD. In the RPP review exercise, I hope the administration can face up to the aging of this population so that there should be early planning for community services and support. By 2030, 1/3 of the population will be over 65 years old, and the same will happen to families with PWDs. According to the CNSD report in 2014, report number 62, many of them will be over 95 years old. For those in between 46 and 46, there are above 46% of them. So by 2030, the median age of PWDs will be over 60 years old. There is a great need for supporting services to the aged PWDs. We don't have enough services for them. There is already a service gap. In terms of long-term care, we are not really supporting the aging PWDs. For a PWD that is over 70 years old, the mental state may be unstable, and frequent hospitalization may be needed. So the carer is close to 50 years old, and even if he is attending to the PWD full-time, it is quite challenging. And the long ANC homes do not have enough services, so they will refuse to accept elderly PWDs, and RCHs will not accept them because of their unstable mental state. So finally, the responsibility will rest with family members or hospitals. So PWD families face a very heavy physical and emotional burden, and this will also increase healthcare expenses of society. So if we have an early plan for aged PWDs, this will ensure that timely and appropriate services can be provided to them. That will lower the burden to society and to families. Thank you. Ms. Lau Shao-King. Thank you. Chairman. Ms. Lee just mentioned the problem of aging among PWDs. Many deputations and individuals have talked about those with physical or mental handicap, but we have to take care of the rehabilitation and future changes of the mentally ill, because they are also aging, and their carers, which include parents, also face the problem of aging because they are getting old and they have spent their whole life taking care of PWDs, and that has taken toll on their physical and mental health. We've seen carers that are over 80 years old and they still have to take care of PWDs over 50 years old. And because the son mental situation is rather unstable, and mental illness is different from physical disability. The elderly parent had to undergo a heart surgery, but he or she was not willing to he is too concerned about his son. He has refused to carry out the operation. So this is a lose-lose situation. We're increasing healthcare expenses, and the PWD may refuse to take medication, to attend follow-up sessions because there is no carer, and there may be a relapse as a result. We don't want any tragedy in society, because the community is so frightened about mental health. So I want the administration to expand its respite care services for families in emergency or in special needs. So there can be temporary hostels for ex-mental patients or mental patients as a transitional arrangement. We have addressed, we've reflected the concerns of the elderly carers. About 78% of the respondents in a questionnaire survey felt that there was the need to expand the respite services. We should increase the number of hostel places, and the stay should be extended to at most 3 months as a transitional arrangement. Because if there is a relapse, we do not want to enhance the negative feeling in society. This will affect peace and society. If there is proper respite care, then family members may be willing to look after their own health. But we do not have any respite services. We only have to see whether there is any vacancy or a temporary vacancy in a hostel before you can apply for respite care. So I want the respite services to be expanded. It should be regularized to relieve the pressure of aging carers. And can the government rent some already abandoned private RCHs and also hostels for the ex-mentally ill, then so as to provide respite care? Yes, interim respite care. Mr. Leung Mong Hong from the Hong Kong Christian Service. Our fellowship serves the ex-mental patients. We have a lot of self-help groups so that they can be independent and then they can help themselves. Well, now for daytime care and community services, I have some comments to make. For daytime care, I have 3 points to make. First, to alleviate the financial burden on carers, the SWD should make use of money under the CCF fund so that for low-income earners of carers of PWDs, there can be allowances for them so that carers who are looking after mental health patients, they can receive a regular monthly subsidy of $2,000, and these people will include people receiving DA, OA, LA, and CSSA. And we should also learn from the experience of a community voucher scheme for the elderly. We should have a similar scheme for the disabled as well, or for the mental health as well, mentally ill as well. And we should provide community support for carers. We can offer training for peer support, and information should be maintained in a database for future matching. Now for community support, I have also got 3 points to make. First, we should enhance the ICCSW of different districts. There should be increased manpower to address the increasing need for mental health services. There should be more places for social activities to encourage the mentally ill to socialize, and there should be more services or resources for ICSW to support the those are living in the community on their own, and there should be enhanced collaboration between different districts. Those are for children and youth, and for integrated family services and the elderly services, so on and so forth. These centers should collaborate to cater for the different needs of the mentally ill. Mr. Wong Man Nip, Alliance for the ex-mental patients. Thank you. I have a few points to make. I understand that under the current CSSA system, application is on a family basis, but understand that once the means test is on a family basis, the income test cannot be met. Can application be done on an individual basis? I understand that there are difficulties, but this is important to the ex-mentally ill, because once application is considered on a family basis, they can never pass the income test. And can we increase the amount to a little bit? Because currently the allowance is 1,200. This is far too low. As a result, the ex-mental patients will lose the incentive to work if the disregarded earning is so low. I hope it can be increased to 6,000 to enhance their motivation to work. And there should at least be 2% in the quota. And there can be tax concessions to encourage employers to employ ex-mental or PWDs. I understand that the Labor Department provides subsidies to employers that employ PWDs. I hope it can be increased to 4,000, and I think it is just $3,000 for 6 months. I hope the duration can be extended to a year. And for peer support, yes, we should promote the idea of peer support. Some ex-mental patients feel that social workers cannot help them, and peers can be more convincing. And I hope this model of peer support can be more comprehensive. And I hope more peer supporters can benefit. Thank you. Mr. Chen Chi-yong. Thank you. Good morning. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to share with you my views. I am the father of an SEN child. When my child was young, was a small kid, he was not yet diagnosed with any learning disability. We had a very hard time because we were not aware of a situation. We thought that he had a conduct problem, and looking back, we still have a guilty feeling when it comes to our handling of my child back then. Perhaps there aren't enough doctors or enough psychiatric support in Hong Kong. The waiting time is very long for services. Can the administration consider providing financial support for such families so that we can receive treatment in the private sector? My child is now a P4 student, and his condition has improved a lot this year. This is because for 2 years we've been receiving special learning special service from a center run by Hong Kong characters. He received physiotherapy and occupational therapy, and after a while I noticed that my kid has improved a lot. Such training is most important. We understand that the demand is great. Can the administration provide financial support to such kids at an earlier stage? Because all doctors will tell you that the critical period is now. So can special support be given to our families like us so that our children can have access to services earlier? And thirdly, SNE children receiving schooling in mainstream schools is not easy because they are required to express themselves in writing. We talked about barrier-free arrangements. Can we consider barrier-free arrangement not just in terms of hardware? Even now there is a lot of IT equipment available. Can we promote this in primary and secondary schools as well? I know there are such arrangements in DSE, but in the whole education sector, can we promote the use of software for SEN children so that they can develop their potential and express what they have learned in a fairer manner? Because we face a lot of difficulties. I think all speakers have made their points very well. Thank you very much for telling us the situation of SEN children. Ms. Chen Yin from the Hong Kong Society of Parkinsonism. Now, Chapter 4 of the RPP on medical rehabilitation. We hope that the patients with Parkinson's disease can have access to DBS at at a later stage, because less than 399 patients have benefited from this in Hong Kong. There are 3 hospitals that can provide this surgery, but the yearly quota is just 9 for each hospital. The purpose is not because the surgery cannot help a patient to fully recover, but then the condition can be maintained for 9 years or 5 years. So 3 hospitals with a quota of 9 each. Well, it started in 1997. You can calculate the number of patients that need to have the device replaced. So I hope the number of quota can be increased, and then assessment before the surgery and care after it. I hope we can have more specialized nurses. We have 200 patients with Parkinson's disease waiting for the surgery, and less than 300 have been dealt with since 1997. And Chapter 8 of the RPP, residential care. I understand that as soon as you reach 60, you can join the queue. But for patients with Parkinson's disease, even before they have reached 60, they have lost their ability to take care of themselves, and they have lost the ability to work, and they have urgent need for residential services. Because it is so sad to tell you that every year there are patients with Parkinson's disease who have taken their lives because they cannot work, they cannot rely on families to look after themselves, so they can only resort to ending their lives. Daycare services, I hope places can also be increased. More resources should be provided so that for those who don't have family members to look after them, they can receive daycare services that will address at least the need for meals of these patients daytime, and the development of self-help groups. They are like and in Wang Tao Ham, a small room will have to house more than a dozen staff members. Even the room is so stuffy, and this is not healthy to staff members working there. Funding from SWT can never meet their needs, and it's hard to give a pay rise to our staff, and therefore the wastage and turnover rate of self-help groups is very high. And lastly, I'd like to turn to rehab bus. Can we have more rehab buses? When? Now, there are rehab buses, but you can't always find drivers. It's been a long time. I'd like to know whether there is still this problem of having no drivers to man our rehab buses. This is not reasonable.
Thank you. Some questions are very specific. We can follow up later. Next, Ms. So Mei-Ying, Chairman, members. I think nervous muscular diseases are very rare diseases, and these patients need different departments, different policies and systems to help them. Because of time, I can only very briefly go through some of our recommendations. Please refer to our written submission for details. First, we should acknowledge carers' contribution and confirm their status in society and their rights. There should be comprehensive carers policy. Besides, there should be more home care service for the severely disabled, so that when foreign domestic helpers are on holiday or when it's Sunday, at least the problem of shortage of labor can be alleviated. For disability allowance, there should be a higher tier of allowance for patients which incur very heavy medical expenses. Next, the amount of disability allowance should be adjusted to make it closer to living standard or cost of living. Besides, the age restriction should be removed because the older patients also have the need. Besides, I think we should make sure that these people's financial condition should be more accurately reflected. Besides, there should be the special care subsidy to alleviate the very heavy financial burden. Now, I think the threshold for medical equipment can be relaxed so that more people can benefit. Besides, concerning the conditions on buying more expensive items, well, the restrictions can be relaxed so that people will not have to give up their treatment opportunity. The definition of rare diseases should be formulated as soon as possible, and related policies should be formulated. Besides, there should be bigger public housing units that can be turned into barrier-free homes so that patients can stay in the community and the waiting time for services can be shortened. Vacant school campuses and public housing units can be used as long-term care home premises. Finally, I suggest that in this rehabilitation program, well, there should be members who are patients of different types and representatives of different types of rare diseases. Thank you. Thank you. If there are patients of different rare diseases, then I think the membership or number of members of the committee will be very big. Thank you. Next, Ms. Lau Sing Xu from New People's Party. Thank you. Well, I know an old lady who has dementia. Well, she doesn't know how to go back home, and when she cooked at home, she didn't remember to turn off the fire. And she had waited a number of years before she is institutionalized. So in between diagnosis and the point when she's admitted, well, there are a lot of threats and danger to herself as well as to her family members. Her family members face big pressure. This is only tip of the iceberg. There are a few 100,000 disabled people who are regarded as minority and their needs were neglected. Well, rehabilitation service is out of balance. There are not enough bed places, not enough carers, not enough healthcare professionals taking care of them. The problem is, last time when the rehabilitation program was reviewed and updated, it was in 2007 already. Over so many years, population, society has changed so much. So how can this plan, dated 10 years ago, be enough to take care of needs of the chronically ill and of the disabled? I believe in the future the government needs to adopt a multi-pronged approach. I think the government should review the program as soon as possible. For example, care homes, facilities, manpower, monitoring system and so on should be examined. If the chronically ill patients live at home, there should be more home care service and support for their daily living, so that the rights of the disabled and the chronically ill can be protected. Thank you. Thank you. As we all know, I think minority doesn't only refer to the number of people, but their rights. So even though they constitute a smaller number in the population, it's just a matter of the number of people. Next, Mr. Zhang Qinping. Chairman, there's one thing I don't understand. Now, the UN Convention for the Disabled has been in place for 10 years already, but why is this discussion about the disabled still within the area of welfare? We are always talking about rights-based, but I seldom hear welfare-based consideration. So it seems that Hong Kong people still treat the disabled as targets of help instead of treating this as a human right issue. I think the disability policy should be a human right matter. We should not only look at the disability of the disabled, we should look at deficiencies of our policies. When it comes to right-based consideration, it is straightforward. We should look at the disabled as human beings. Let me give an example. In the last RPP review, well, at that time I was in the steering committee, and at a meeting I made a point. I know that some disabled people, no matter whether they are in the community or in institutions, their sex needs have not been paid attention to. I raised this point at the meeting back then, and everybody was silent. This point was not even recorded in the minutes. Chairman, officials, members, you also have sexual needs. So why can't disabled people's sexual needs be dealt with? This is only a tip of the iceberg. There are many other examples showing that we do not treat the disabled as human beings. So I suggest that we should call this as a review of disability policy and rehabilitation program as a whole in Hong Kong. Many deputations also said that the first point of this review is to look at the definition of the disabled, because if the service targets of the policy are still not clear, if we are still talking about the group of people defined a few decades ago, then is this worthwhile? So we should look at whether ICF can be brought in, and in this review, who do we want to service regarding ICF in mainland China, Taiwan, and Macau? Well, this is not discussed only in Hong Kong. This is really surprising. So I think we should handle this as the first point in this review. You are not the only one raising this issue. We are not only asking for welfare. There should be rights for the disabled. We should look at the deficiencies of the system, not only the disabled people's needs. Thank you for your reminder. You made a point about sexual needs. You said you are one of the members of the last review committee, and you made this point, but it is not recorded and it was not discussed as well. Well, that happened in 2007. In 2007, the report was issued. In fact, we started the discussion in 2005. The meeting I referred to took place on the 30th of June 2005. It's an RPP steering committee. Thank you. We can follow up later. Next, Ms. Li Po Ling. A member of the Parents and Relatives Society of the Blind. Thank you, Chairman. Many deputations said that the definition of population census and the disabled should be updated. For example, YCN and so on. In the coming 10 years, I think that this can be incorporated in our review. Today is very similar with another public hearing I attended some time ago. I hope that social welfare and rehabilitation do not only involve SWD. It is related to transport, housing, FEHD, and Department of Health. So I hope that these departments and bureaus can take active part in the review. Otherwise, if there's only SWD involved, there won't be a very complete plan. So this should be a cross-departmental policy. My second point is in situ housing for the elderly. That is, are we talking about elderly care and also the disabled as well? So should they be taken care of at home? Then if when it comes to existing service, for example, institutional service and also community support, these are all related. If you look at the funding service agreements over the past decades, they have not been amended based on changes in population and aging population trends. So in RPP, I hope that the government can tell the Hong Kong public whether they are still working on aging at home. If so, are we only talking about the elderly? Can the disabled be included? Because aging population is a territory-wide problem. And aging of the mentally retarded even happens earlier than in normal people. So I hope that there will be this cooperation between medical and social welfare. In the past 10 to 20 years, there is district-based support and outreach service. In the future, there may be nutritional scientists or pharmaceutical experts support. But then when it comes to aging of the mentally retarded, the service cannot catch up. So because of such special needs, I hope there will be collaboration between the healthcare and social welfare sectors, and there should be public participation as well. Thank you. Okay, let's invite the last deputation for this first session, Mr. Hon Wing-sung. Thank you, Chairman. I want to make 2 points. First, disability allowance. I am a renal disease patient. For the chronically ill, many people are not getting DA. We also suffer from failure of some organs, and when we are on the MTR, when we take those special seats for the disabled, people will look at us. Well, we know that we suffer from some diseases, but why doesn't the government offer us a definition? When we go to see the doctor will say, "Oh, I have treated you. But how come I still have to go for dialysis every week, 2 times, 2 hemodialysis, and 3 other dialysis of the my lower abdomen cavity?" So the doctor may say that I have cured you already, but okay, you can take up employment. Can we really find a job in which we will have to be away 2 days out of 5? Besides, for the DA, to many patients, it will be spent on medical equipment and items. For dialysis patients, people will say that you have recovered, so you don't need that money. In fact, we do need the money because we are still on dialysis. So concerning the definition of chronically ill, well, these patients will not really be cured. So why can't we be given a correct identity or an accurate identity? There are difficulties for us to take up employment, even if I approach the Labor Department. The officer who helps me said that, well, you can be away for 2 days, but please come back to make sure that you can work for 5 whole days a week. But this is not possible. We have to do dialysis 3 times a day. So we need a space, even in the office, to have dialysis. And the government does not offer any supporting facilities for renal disease patients. I find it difficult to find job. Now, I consider myself a retired person. I cannot find a job even though I have experience. I have more than 10 years of clerical experience. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Han. As Dr. Law said at the beginning, this is a cross-departmental matter which is very broad and also very specialized. Different deputations of different backgrounds have spoken. Some are mildly mentally retarded, some are disabled, some are severely mentally retarded, some have muscular problems, some have Parkinson's disease or renal disease, and so on and so forth. So the area is broad, covering physical and mental aspects. There are some points in common. For example, ICF, definition of disabled, and also that the DA is not adequate. Many people mentioned this point. Some departments show some reactions, but not all. And wheelchairs cannot be accommodated by ambulance. Later on, perhaps we should ask the official to report. In the last meeting, they said that they will gather data, and just now some asked about the progress of data collection. We should end this meeting at 1, so I guess you are tired already. I hope to conclude this session at 1 p.m. sharp. So, Secretary, can you please respond first, and then colleagues can ask questions. Thank you, Chairman. As you said, deputations here today talk about needs and problems faced by the disabled. There are so many different points. I can say honestly that even though I have worked on welfare and education for so many years, there are really big challenges in relation to rehabilitation. There are different people and families facing different challenges. So we really face huge challenge in formulating the rehabilitation program plan. We really rely on stakeholders to give their views to us. Many points were made just now. I don't think it's realistic for me to make a response to all the points. So many colleagues are here. We have taken note of points made. There are things that we need to go back to follow up, but we may not need to wait till the actual plan being formulated. Many deputations are concerned about ICF and the definition of the disabled. As said earlier, in the first stage of the rehabilitation program, first thing is that we have to look at the definition of the disabled. Are we going to use it, and how? Well, it will be taken up by the future committee.
I've also heard about reference to cross or interdepartmental collaboration. If we are to consider the needs of the disabled, then the best person should be the CSOA. And if that's the case, then he will be responsible for nearly all government policies, because many policies are cross-departmental or cross-bureau. Now the main portfolio is in the hands of the LWB. In the review working group, there will be departmental representatives. Some may say that's a matter of authority. Then should it be led by the CMAB? I think the buck stops here. And it is an important task of the LWB. We hope we can move various bureaus and departments to get involved. in the review and also in the formulation and implementation of policy. As for consultation and collection of data, I leave it to the Commissioner. Just a quick answer. The gentleman asked a question on data on the intellectually disabled. The CNS department conducted home visits. Some family members had reservations about intellectually disabled family members at home, and therefore they might not disclose the details. The estimate is 70,000 to 100,000. That is an extrapolation by the CNS department, as said by deputations here, and also as said by people we've come across on other occasions. The statistics, including the stage of intellectual disability, may affect the provision service. We have had proposals that the administrative records of different departments and bureaus can be put together so that there can be the details about the extent of the extent of disability, and also the situation of the service users. I think the main problem is privacy. We have had good progress. We have received a reply from the Privacy Commissioner, and the Commissioner said that certain privacy information can be hid, and the CNS department can therefore embark on such studies. And now open the floor to members. Have I seen Dr. Cheung's hand, and then Mr. Leung Chi Cheung, Dr. Fernando Cheung, 4 minutes. First, I'd like to thank the deputations for coming to express their views on the RPP. First, the name is a problem. Rehabilitation is the perspective in looking at the needs of the disabled. I think that's very limited and outdated. This is a disability policy on disability. So we should therefore call the spade a spade. I think it should be for the government to propose a policy. And in proposing a policy, there is a need to involve the people and also to consult. Now it's put under, the policy is put under the RAC. The government is hiding from the problem. My concern is that the government don't have the idea. The government doesn't have the idea. Now, if you look at the 3 so-called guiding principles, they didn't mention rights-based policy. It mentioned lifespan, cross-sectoral collaboration, in-depth and extensive consultation and study. That's not the guiding principle. Now, if you don't have any guiding principle, if you don't have any idea about it, then it's really a serious handicap. Now, you should have your ideals come first. You should be guided by principles. Now, how should you approach the RPP? There will be 60 consultation sessions. There will be focus group discussions, and there will be a review working group. Now, a working group cannot be too big. You need to pick and choose the members. But this is a very complicated issue. It involves the needs of carers. It's about definition. It's also about data. and some refer to special education needs of preschool children. There's also the issue of mental health and multiple disorder, and some refers to the needs of self-help groups. Now, these are the special topics. Now, in your first phase, you have the so-called scoping. And then afterwards, how are you going to embark on the discussions? I think the working group faces a lot of constraints. Now, this case, CSS has a specific proposal. With regard to the issues set out, can there be task forces following up the issues? And these task forces should widely solicit the views of the community. And then such views can be funneled to the review working group, and then policy targets should be set, manpower, resources, land, service contents should be specifically planned. I hope that finally the program plan can show people that there is vision and mission, and such vision and mission can be materialized. Well, Dr. Law, would you like to respond? That is sort of deja vu. At the previous panel meeting on welfare, I've already responded to Dr. Cheung's view. And the Rehab Commissioner also said that we will adhere to the principles of the UN Convention. The UN Convention has many important principles. Now, the preamble says that we will adhere to the principles of the UN Convention. We will certainly adhere to those principles. I may be repeating myself, but in respect of the work, this is the case. With regard to the work of the review working group, the Commissioner will speak on that. The Commissioner. With regard to the modus operandi, I think our approach is similar to that mentioned by Dr. Cheung, and the HKCSS representative said that there shouldn't just be a single consultant. Now, today you have seen the consultants of the PolyU present. They are responsible for the consultancy of the review working group, and we do not rule out the following possibility. We will set up several task forces, not just a single task force mentioned by Dr. Cheung. I said many, not one. Yes, we'll set up several task forces. As for how many, and also the terms of reference, that will be something dealt with by the working group. We will look at the matters of common concern. The major consultant, from the PolyU will arrange for public consultation sessions. Members of the public can enroll and give their views, and we will also send out invitations to focus groups. We will adopt a two-pronged approach. At the present stage, I cannot answer the question as to how many public sessions will be held. We will look at the situation after the review working group is formed, and we will also look at the public consultation sessions afterwards, and if need be, we can have more. Some of the deputations have asked this question. In the whole exercise, the role of the consultants are very important. So are the consultants dealing with rehab service or services for the disabled? Chairman, we have invited the PolyU the consultants from the PolyU, because the PolyU has a rehab department and a rehab faculty. And this rehab faculty provides training to OTPTs and also cover the area of aging of the disabled, and also the needs of the disabled in writing up their proposal. They have adequate experience. So Dr. Mo is from the rehab faculty. Now, Dr. Mo is a member of the whole consultancy team. The team is headed by the head of the faculty. Chairman, if I may add, with regard to consultation, I hope the community understands this. We will organize consultation forums which is open to all. But if we are to have in-depth discussion on specific topics, then we need to be focused. And if we have to be focused, then we must impose a number on the members. Otherwise, we can have more public fora. If we want to have in-depth discussions, then we will need to have focus groups. And once we have focus groups, then people will ask why I am not allowed. Well, if it is open to the public, open to all, then it cannot be focused. So we have difficulties in this regard. And in particular, we need to focus on the needs of the disabled. And if we are not focused, we cannot get in depth. Next, Mr. Leung Chi-Chang. Chairman, I'd like to thank the deputations for coming to give their views. I have learned a lot about the needs of the PWDs. The RPP was formulated, the present RPP was formulated in 2007. And I have seen that it covers a wide spectrum of issues and also resources. There's a need to update the policy. But only by 2019 year-end, there will be a report. And the administration will only implement the recommendations in 2020, barring any unforeseen circumstances and with all the available resources. So some have already commented on that. Can you increase the DDA, the disability allowance? I think the Policy Secretary can decide whether the disability allowance can be increased. You don't need to wait till 2019. The Bureau should consider this. If there are certain views which you think are good and should be implemented as early as possible, then will you not therefore give it policy support or give them policy support and then seek funding from this council? So those can be implemented immediately. The RPP covers many issues and areas. Recently, the hearing impaired came to me. They said that there was a fight. The police investigated them, but the police didn't get any sign language interpreters, and the hearing impaired was charged. I think there should be an established policy. Say when the police investigate the disabled, the hearing impaired, they should get a sign language interpreter. Otherwise, investigation should not proceed. This is very important. It's about resources. It's about policy. It's also about discrimination. This is a very wide topic. I do agree with Dr. Law that you have to be so focused. Say, for example, you need to have the hearing impaired to come forward to give their views and have detailed discussion with you. A focus group is necessary. As for open discussion, in fact, the groups have written in. So I'm in favor of the focus groups. So, Mr. Leung, you have given a piece of your mind to the Bureau. I do have some questions. Can those measures be implemented immediately? Say, for example, raising the disability allowance immediately. Dr. Law, in formulating the EPP, we have identified certain matters which we can implement ASAP. Now, for improvement measures in respect of rehabilitation services, we don't need to wait for the completion of the consultation. Now, we have heard some of the views today, and those views can be followed up immediately, and we don't need to wait for the revised or updated RPP. Now, the chairman came with the 1995 white paper. If you look at the 1995 white paper, you can see, you will be able to see that the area we will cover will be far wider than the white paper. For example, learning difficulties are not covered. In fact, the scope that we are going to cover will far exceed the 1995 white paper or the 2007 RPP. If you call it an update, it is not an accurate description. And a more accurate description, in fact, is a renewal of our policy. Of course, we have got the help of the RAC, but finally, the responsibility falls on my lap. Now, they have 17 chapters in the 1997 White Paper in education, employment, housing, community participation, family participation, transport, public education, manpower training, IT, and research, and legislative matters. 17 chapters altogether and 12 appendices. Of course, I look forward to a more comprehensive review. I'd like to thank 31 deputations and individuals for coming to share their views. We, of course, have put your views on record, and I believe the Bureau and the consultant team have put them down as well. We will follow up the measures that can be followed immediately. Say, for example, the wheelchairs cannot get on to the ambulances. Thank you very much. We have a break. Dr. Chang, just a minute.
Mr. Leung from the SWD is using a wheelchair, but he had an accident when using the wheelchair. In this room, I must apologize to him. He is really embarrassing that he had to go through this in council. So I hope that on behalf of the panel, Chairman, you can write to the Electoral Commission asking it to review the barrier-free access and facilities of the whole electrical complex to ensure that our facilities can suit the needs of everyone, in particular at places where there are frequently public users. The current arrangement is really leaves room for improvement. I will urge, please write to the Electrical Commission asking for an immediate review of all the facilities of the electrical building here. Once again, may I apologize to Mr. Leung Sai-chung of the SWD. Now, this is not the most ideal arrangement, but our usual practice is if we're informed that we have a wheelchair user to the meeting, we will arrange that he be seated in the first row. But I do agree that this is not the ideal arrangement. On behalf of the panel, I will approach a follow-up with the Commission on universal access. Well, Deputy Chairman, I assisted in helping Mr. Leung up again, so I really find it unacceptable that the Council has such facilities, and please follow up on our behalf. Thank you, and we'll resume at 2 p.m.